Okay, so I took the approach here with a more upper level, grade level assignment that I'm giving an example of here today. And I also chose science, but this one is from a ninth grade class, like in an earth science type of a course offering. And I decided to kind of approach it from this idea of you wanted to develop this lesson that is going to address the standards that relate to renewable or inexhaustible energy systems. And I wasn't sure exactly what those were. And so I asked ChatGPT to help me make this activity and align to the Minnesota science standards, which it did. And so that was kind of the basis of how I began approaching this particular lesson. Um, and it was interesting when I asked ChatGPT then to help me to create a couple different versions of these lessons that would address these standards. It did a really good job of, well, first I made a good prompt, don't get me wrong. And a lot of times, here's a good teaching tip too when using AI and prompting, the more detail that you can give it, the better results you're going to get. And so you can see I created a pretty elaborate prompt, right? And then I had it create two different lessons that would meet and address those standards. The first one was a tech infused lesson. And so you're going to see that this one here, and I'm going to show my example of it here, I adapted slightly because, when you create something here, you still have to go and check out the different parts of what it creates to make sure that it exists. And when I went to include these short interactive simulation activities that it says I should grab, I went to this FET Interactive Simulations and HHM Bio Interactives, and they exist, both sites, and they both look like really cool places if you're looking for some sort of a little simulation about how something works. But they didn't have the simulations for the areas that I was actually looking for. And so it would not have worked pretty well for me to share this as an assignment. So what I did instead is I went and did my own searching and found a CK12 source, which I'll show, that does a great job of simulating how if you change different factors of a wind turbine, it's going to affect its efficiency and its ability to generate energy. And so we'll demonstrate that here as the source instead. So it took this one from being kind of general about different types of energy systems into a tech infused lesson that's going to be more about wind energy. Still very good and still very appropriate for Minnesota, especially if you are living in those areas of more southern Minnesota, southwestern Minnesota, where you see giant wind farms pop up all over the place, and then extends out into North and South Dakota as well. Then I had ChatGPT also help me with developing a low or a no tech version, which, it was really hard to say, I just want a no tech version because what do you define technology as, right? If you're showing kids an image on a screen, is that using technology, even though that's not in their hands, right? So, in that sense, what we have then is going to be the low tech version of an activity that will also address those same standards. It's just going to be, using more of those tried and true traditional teaching methods that are going to be very hands-on and, is going to be a good lesson for students that just have a different learning style than a student who would appreciate the tech versions of it. So they're both, in my mind, really good lessons. It's just best as that instructor what's going to be the most meaningful and impactful to your students, and then that's really where you should go with the direction of your lesson. So I created here then this. I also used Canva this time. I usually default to creating presentations in Google Slides, but I thought I would switch it up here a little bit too. And so we have this lesson here that I'm going to I added my own spins to it, but definitely used AI to help me generate, which is interesting a little bit because I used AI to help generate the old traditional teaching one. And it did a pretty good job of giving me some great ideas of where to go with that. So the first thing here that I have also in the presentation are the standards that it's going to address. And then I break it up into making a tech infused lesson, where we're going to focus our activity here mostly on the use of wind as a renewable energy source. And it does begin with this activity where students are able to manipulate the propeller diameters as well as the speed of the wind. And it's going to create some data charts as you do that, which show the differences in the wind speed and the propeller diameter and the resulting amounts of energy that get produced, whether or not you have a wind or don't have a wind. And so going through that simulation, changing those different variables, students then are going to record the data that they create into a table, which is going to be able to then kind of collect the information, which then they are going to in turn, and I should back up here too. The other thing that I liked about this activity that ChatGPT created for me is that it used the 5E scientific lesson planning criteria, where you engage, then you explore, then you move on to explain. And so once you have that data in the table, you can use that data to help address these different questions. So this would be you knowing your students here. I develop these kind of guided questions to help them address. You could have students, if you thought that they were of a little bit stronger academic ability in the sciences and they wanted to explain their own data in their own way using their results, you could definitely do that too. But I included those guiding questions as a way to kind of prompt kids in the direction I wanted them to go. Then you can take that explanation and elaborate on it, take it from being what individual kids were working on to now like, hey, let's share our information and did we come to the same results and conclusions, and where might putting some of these things in our state be best and why. So it takes it, it expands it, and then you can evaluate it at the end. Since this is the tech infused one, having your student not just turn in a piece of paper, but submit their data chart digitally, as well as their analyses to the different questions and maybe a reflection on the class discussion directly into their LMS, which I think would be a great way. I think students would definitely get the concepts that the standard is trying to address in that very tech-infused lesson. The other thing that I decided to try, and again, I had ChatGPT kind of help me develop this more low-tech activity here, is to have students investigate different types of energy, renewable energy sources that could potentially be used in Minnesota. And so, here again, you're going to begin by engaging the students and showing them these objects. If you had physical versions of the objects, you could definitely show them the physical examples. I bet most teachers are going to be able to find a calculator that's solar powered somewhere, right? I have one of these hand crank flashlights at home, and kind of that emergency storm kit, right? If you bring that in, that could be an item you use to generate. I don't know if you're going to have a model of a water wheel inside of your classroom. So even though it's tech to show an image, I think students would get the ideas behind them if you showed them the image, if you didn't have your hands on those physical documents, or not physical documents, hands on those physical items. Then we're going to go on to that explore area where students are going to go through 3 different stations and rotate through them. And at each station, there is a hands-on like little mini lab, little mini experiment to try based upon the different types of energy systems that they're looking at. And the first one here is going to use solar energy, which was really interesting because I had ChatGPT give me the ideas for these stations, and it did a great job with them. And then because, I don't know if anybody's explored DeepSeek as a new large language model, the new one that's out there. And that's a whole other debatable topic that I don't really want to go into, but I was
I'm
playing
afraid.
around and
I'm afraid
experimenting with
to.
it. What's that?
I'm afraid to.
Yeah, a little bit. But I had to see what it's going to do because people were asking me about it. So, and that's one of the things with the job that we have. We kind of have to be able to answer some questions of people once in a while. But anyway, that's a different story. What I was really trying to do, well, what I thought was interesting here is that both DeepSeek and ChatGPT gave me very similar labs, mini labs to try for the solar powered one. And it was white paper and black paper and measuring the temps on those with the heat lamp over the top of them over time. And so weird that, or maybe not weird, that they both came up with the same example. So students would be given an amount of time, probably about 10 minutes at each station to work through these different ones. Then you have one to simulate more of wind energy, which you could use that hand crank generator that we showed at the beginning if you actually have the physical ones of those, which are probably pretty easy to get your hands on. And what you're trying to do is to get it to get an LED bulb to charge and to show light and how long it takes and how long it lasts, and how hard is it to kind of crank that. Then the water wheel one was kind of the fun one, where you kind of use spoons, and or bottle caps, and you use a pitcher of water and you pour it over the top of a wheel that you make using cardboard and some other things. There was a picture of it that I had in one of the earlier slides. But anyway, students work on this, and through all of these different stations that they go through, they're collecting their data in, again, another chart. And again, you as the teacher probably are going to create the chart that they're going to use for these. And then there's also a spot on there, what I like about this, for them to put their own observations that they discovered. Then with the group that they rotated around to the stations with, they can have a conversation in that group like, hey guys, we went through these ones, which one seemed to be the best way to generate energy from, you guys know Minnesota, what would be the most reliable based on the type of terrain that we have, the amounts of winds that we have, accessibility to water sources, or think about how many days of the year do we get sun that charging solar would be able to help. But anyway, they're starting to think about these different factors and what engineers would have to consider if they were going to develop some sort of a plant to be able to harness these renewable sources in Minnesota. You could then bring the class back together, have an to elaborate, you could have a debate about this, where each group, after presenting the things that they learned, they could go through a debate, discuss why they think wind or solar or water would be best. And, I asked ChatGPT, give me some tips for this debate to make sure that students are debating appropriately. So even though this is a very low or no tech activity, it's still okay as the teacher to ask, AI, or ask for some ideas to help keep it low tech at the same time, which I think it did a really good job for. And then this lesson also ends with an exit ticket, but this time, students are going to turn in their results and their reflections on paper to the teacher as they leave. So I think, overall, I think both of these lessons could do a great job delivering the content aligned to the standards that we tried to base it on. So, again, it's just you as the teacher knowing what is going to be best for your students. Now, what I didn't do with this, which you could also, is you could go through and you could actually ask, let's blend it, make some sort of a hybrid, or you as a teacher could, take the best parts of one, add it to the best parts of the other, to what's best going to suit your needs.
Yeah, I like both of them. I think what's cool about the first one is I like a lot of those models that you can manipulate and play around with. And it's
right, because I doubt you're going to be able to bring a wind turbine into your classroom.
right.
So, but yet you can learn what it does,
Yeah.
through those
Well,
models.
yeah, and that's a little bit too of a quicker way, where you can, it's more accessible to
Mhm.
some degree where you can access that. The other
Which you
one's
wouldn't
great
be able to
too.
without the technology, right?
Right. Yeah. Because the other one's great too, but maybe you don't have the resources to provide all those materials for your students. So it's a good alternative in that sense too. But I really like both of them. I think they both um, serve, learning about the same thing just from a different method. So I really enjoyed both of them.
Right, and it's striking that balance. It's knowing the needs of your students and what their learning preferences and styles are, and being able to deliver the content that you have to them where they're at.